During the last video, we learned about Hitler's main ideas as presented in Mein Kampf. Today we are going to cover his rise to political power. In 1930, the Nazi Party went from 12 to 107 seats in the German Reichstag, or parliament, and they became the second largest political party in Germany. Here is a quote from after the election when the new Nazis were in the Reichstag. On October 13, 1930, dressed in their brown shirts, the elected Nazi deputies marched in unison into the Reichstag and took their seats. When the roll call was taken, each one shouted, "Present, Heil Hitler." Here are photographs of the 1930 election. The top photo is Hitler at the campaign office waiting on results from the election, and the bottom photo are Nazi party members holding up campaign signs. What exactly was the Nazi Party promising in 1930? They promised a return to traditional morality, something they claimed was lacking in the current Weimar Republic. They promoted German nationalism, that they would bring back the glory days of Bismarck and the German Empire to restore German greatness. They ran on an anti-communist platform, promising protection from communism. They said they would restore Germany as it was before the Treaty of Versailles, restoring Germany's borders and territory, standing up to France and Britain, and refusing to continue paying the huge war reparations. And the Nazis promised to restore the German economy and create jobs. Lastly, they promised militarism and a devotion to Germany's military, which had been severely cut after World War I due to the Treaty of Versailles. Many German World War I veterans were never able to receive help after World War I, and the Nazis promised to correct these wrongs. What was happening in Germany that made the campaign promises of the Nazis in 1930 so appealing? The Great Depression had hit Germany very hard, and employment was almost at 30%. Remember, the United States had been helping Germany recover from hyperinflation. But when the Great Depression hit, many of those funds dried up, and America began enacting tariffs on trade goods to protect American business, which further hurt the German economy as they couldn't export their goods. Due to the unprecedented levels of unemployment, many families were going hungry and child malnutrition was widespread. By the late 1920s, fearing a return of inflation, the government cut back on spending and providing services for struggling citizens, which further exacerbated the economic problems. In 1932, Germany held a presidential election. The election was between the incumbent or current president of Germany, Paul von Hindenburg, and Adolf Hitler. Hindenburg was the second president of the Weimar Republic and would serve in that role from 1925 to 1934. Hindenburg was not eager to run again, but he was finally convinced by his advisors that he was the only one who stood a chance against the fresh-faced politician Adolf Hitler. In his 1932 presidential campaign, Hitler's slogan was "Freedom and Bread," meaning freedom for Germany and literal food for the nation. Joseph Goebbels is chosen to lead the campaign, and he orchestrates thousands of Nazi rallies across Germany, the distribution and design of propaganda posters for Hitler, and the effective dissemination of millions of pro-Hitler pamphlets. Goebbels will become one of Hitler's right-hand men during World War II and will be named the chief minister of propaganda in Nazi Germany. Many people saw the Nazis as the future and the Weimar Republic as outdated and holding back German progress. Here are photographs from the 1932 presidential election. At the top, you can see Nazi supporters hanging a Hitler campaign poster. The middle photo is of Hitler holding a radio address of a campaign rally and speech. And the top right photograph is a campaign poster for the incumbent President Hindenburg, which shows his face and in German reads, "With him." Here are more examples of Nazi campaign posters from 1932. The posters are very cleverly made to convey very specific ideas for the time. The one on the left shows a German man breaking free, and it reads, "Enough! Vote Hitler!" Think of all the things the Germans probably felt that they had had enough of by 1932. Bad economic situation, repayment of war reparations, still having their lands occupied by other nations. On the right, you can see the reference to Hitler's World War I service, asking for all workers in Germany, whether of the mind, so white-collar workers, or workers of the hand, blue-collar workers, to vote for Hitler. The poster on the left lists Hitler's campaign slogan, "Freedom and Bread," and shows the Nazi emblem of the swastika as the sun shining down over the rich fields of Germany. The one on the right is probably the most famous Hitler campaign poster. It is simply his face and name. These last two propaganda posters are aimed directly at German women. Remember, the Weimar Republic had universal suffrage, so women were a large percent of the voting population. On the left, the poster shows a mother and her children, and it reads, "German women, think of your children. Vote Hitler." On the left, you see a happy German mother and baby with the word Sieg, which translates to victory, over them. And then on the other side, you see a depiction of the Soviet Union, with people dying and starving, as what can be assumed at the top is a Jewish communist leering over them all, and the words Bolshevism appearing at the bottom. So this poster is saying you can vote for Hitler and have victory, or you can suffer like the Soviet Union under communism. In the end, the 1932 presidential election was won by the current president, Paul von Hindenburg. But what is notable is that Hitler won almost 37% of the vote, while the communist candidate only received 10%. In the German system, there were 2 rounds of voting if no candidate received a clear majority in the first round. And in the second round, Hitler received almost 13.5 million votes. So by 1932, the Nazi Party was not a fringe party in Germany. They were a force to be contended with. Even though Hitler ultimately lost the 1932 presidential election, it really was a Nazi victory in many ways. Their popularity skyrocketed across Germany, and it showed clearly now that Germany was politically fractured, with a large percent of the German population wanting a new direction for the Weimar Republic. And while they may have lost the presidential bid, the Nazis will sweep the 1932 Reichstag or parliamentary elections, riding on Hitler's message about restoring German greatness. We are skipping Hitler's campaign speech for now, and we will watch this together as a class. Even with the presidential loss in the Reichstag, the Nazi Party gained 123 new seats to now hold a total of 230 seats in the Reichstag. The Nazi Party was now the largest in the Reichstag, but still lacked the all-important majority. The next largest party were the Communists, with only 89 total seats. The Reichstag at this time had 608 seats, and it would take one party to have 305 before holding the majority. Here is a picture showing the leaders of the 3 main parties in the 1932 Reichstag elections. Looking at the numbers and turnout, you can clearly see that the Nazis were the biggest winners, while the second party, the Social Democrats, lost seats, and the Communists, the third party, only gained 12. Here are the Reichstag elections in Germany from 1924 until 1933. Note the popularity of the dark navy blue color, which is the NSDAP, or the Nazi Party, how it is rising well above the other parties from 1932 onward. One of the biggest reasons for Nazi victory in the Reichstag were the terrible economic conditions in Germany, as millions and millions of people continued to face unemployment. The number of unemployed workers kept rising, and the Nazis promised to fix that and return Germany to its historic economic prosperity. Here is a list of why the Nazis appealed to different groups of people in Germany. The German middle class, the Nazis offered protection from communists and promised to protect private property. They also claimed to be the party of law and order and would bring peace to Germany. To the upper class, they promised that they would create a stronger government and would not give in to the Treaty of Versailles and would restore Germany to the days before World War I. For the capitalists and industrialists, they said they would suspend trade unions and protect business from communism. To the working class, they promised work and the restoration of the German economy. To rural families, they promised they would help restore the price of agricultural products. And to women, the Nazis emphasized morality and family values, praising mothers and holding motherhood up as one of the highest achievements possible. Due to his tremendous popularity and under intense political pressure, President Hindenburg named Adolf Hitler his Chancellor on January 30th, 1933. In the Weimar Republic, the president was the official head of state and the chancellor was head of the government. A Weimar president was elected, and then that president selected a chancellor to form his new government and run that government. German conservatives feared growing communist influence in Germany and abroad from the Soviet Union. They thought appointing the right-wing Hitler would be a better idea since they thought they could control him and his radical followers. Here are photographs of Hitler as Chancellor next to President Hindenburg and a photograph of him leaving the Reichstag after his official appointment. Almost 1 month to the day after being appointed Chancellor of Germany, the Reichstag is set on fire in an arson attack on February 27, 1933. A young communist is arrested for the arson attack, and the Nazis, especially Hitler, seize on this and claim that he burned down the Reichstag, and that is proof that the communists were trying to take over Germany. In reality, we are not sure if it was this young communist who set fire to the Reichstag. This event greatly benefited the Nazis, and in all probability, it's very likely that it was set up by Hitler for political gain. However, that is just historical conjecture, since there is no hard evidence. The burning of the Reichstag is a defining moment in Hitler's rise to power, and one you need to memorize and know. Under pressure from Hitler, President Hindenburg issues the Reichstag fire decree following the arson attack. This is where that Article 48 of the Weimar Constitution comes into play. Remember, this was the emergency powers clause that allowed the president to suspend civil liberties and assume the powers of the Reichstag in times of emergency. This is exactly what happened. When Hindenburg evoked Article 48, it suspended the civil rights of citizens that were established in the Weimar Constitution. These photographs are from the night of the Reichstag fire decree. Here is a copy of a piece of Hindenburg's decree. Notice that it states that this order is in defense against communist acts of violence. Due to this decree, the following rights of German citizens were now suspended: habeas corpus, or the right to have just charges brought against you before being arrested; freedoms of speech and expression; the right of citizens to assemble and protest; the right to privacy in their communication, such as by mail or phone, meaning the government could now read their mail and listen to their conversations without warrants. They also increased the government's rights to use warrants and conduct warrantless searches of private property, such as in people's homes or businesses. It is after the 1933 Reichstag fire decree and the limiting of citizens' rights based on Article 48 that Nazi violence really began to increase. Nazis led by the SA, or brown shirts, began beating up political opponents, attacking communist members, and breaking up opposition meetings. Two Nazi groups you need to become familiar with, as they play very important roles before and during Hitler's rise to power in World War II, are the two main paramilitary groups for the Nazis. The first group formed was the SA, or the Sturmabteilung. This was the original paramilitary group, and the name translates to Storm Detachment or Stormtroopers. They played a large role during Hitler's initial rise to power in the early 1930s, as he's running for president and right after he is appointed chancellor. They were used to intimidate people, often beat people up in the streets, and were also used to show that Hitler was the law and order candidate that would clean up the streets. They wore brown uniforms and therefore were nicknamed the Brown Shirts. This is very similar to the black shirt group of Mussolini that he used in Italy. However, the SA will not last. They are almost completely wiped out after an event known as the Night of the Long Knives, which we will discuss later, and only a fraction continue to function as the SS replaces them. The second group, the SS or the Schutzstaffel, come to power after the SA is diminished. The SS becomes the most important paramilitary group for the Nazis, and they were in charge of security, surveillance, and terror throughout the Reich. The SS had several different branches, and their responsibilities ranged from the day-to-day enforcement of racial policies. They fought with military units. They were the orchestrators of the concentration camp and death camp systems, and they formed the Gestapo or secret police. The SA is recognizable by their brown uniforms, while the SS is recognizable by their lightning rod insignia and well-known black uniforms. The photograph at the bottom is a picture of SS troops. If you look closely, you can see the lightning rod insignia on their uniform collars. In the 1933 Reichstag election, the Nazis gained another 92 seats and were just shy of the 305 majority. They began using intimidation and force, usually perpetrated by SA brown shirt gangs, to force a coalition government to meet their goal, the Enabling Act. In March 1933, Hitler oversaw the passage of the Enabling Act. This event is very important for you to remember and understand. The Enabling Act gave Hitler, the Chancellor, the right to pass any law without the Reichstag. Remember, the Reichstag was the legislative body in Germany, the law-making part of the government. They effectively gave away all their power to Hitler. Members of the Reichstag that were not part of the Nazi Party obviously did not want to give this kind of power to Hitler, as it would eliminate any notion of checks and balances in their government and effectively create a dictatorship. So to force the vote, Nazi brown shirts, SA, blocked all the doors and surrounded the legislators, forcing them to vote in favor of the Enabling Act. Once the Enabling Act was passed, Hitler now essentially had all power in Germany and could make any law he wanted. Within a month of the passage of the Enabling Act, Hitler passes his first anti-Jewish law on April 7, 1933. This was known as the Civil Service Restoration Act, which said that any non-Aryans, Jews, and anyone that opposed the Nazi Party could not hold a civil service job, which means any government position like being a teacher or a judge. Soon, more anti-Jewish laws followed, banning Jews from being lawyers, doctors, and tax consultants, among others. Worried about the alliance between France and Poland and wanting to rearm Germany without causing international outcry, Hitler reaches out to Poland in January 1934 and signs the German-Polish Non-Aggression Pact. Each nation promised to forego any armed conflict against the other for 10 years. Note how strategic this was of Hitler. Remember, we know now that Poland was a goal of his all along. But in 1934, Hitler realized Germany was not ready to take it. So to build Germany back up to be able to invade Poland, he needed to appease France and Britain and make them not worry about Germany. The way he did this was by signing an agreement and promising to not invade Poland. His intention was always to attack Poland, but he realized he had to fool the World War I Allied powers before he could do it. Trying to appease the old German military class and realizing that his gangs of brown shirts were becoming a liability for him, On June 30th, 1934, Hitler ordered the purging or murder of thousands of SA members. By the time it was over, he had effectively reduced the SA to a very small number and eliminated any potential political Nazi rivals. On August 2nd, 1934, President Hindenburg died. Within hours of his death, Hitler, using the Enabling Act powers, merged the offices of President and Chancellor and created the new office of Fuhrer. Fuhrer simply translates to leader. On August 19th, Hitler ordered a countrywide referendum or vote for the people's approval on the merging of the two offices. Now, note this was not necessary, as Hitler had the legal power to create this new position based on the Enabling Act. This was merely show or propaganda to prove that he had the will of the people, and it would legitimize his power. When the vote came back, 88% of voting Germans have voted in favor of his new title and position as Führer. Hitler now made every member of the military, remaining SA, and the now growing SS swear a personal allegiance to him. Here are photographs showing propaganda banners ahead of the Führer referendum vote and images of Hindenburg's official death photograph and funeral procession. Here are the loyalty oaths Hitler forced public officials and soldiers to take. For public officials, I swear I shall be loyal and obedient to Adolf Hitler, the Führer of the German Reich and people, respect the laws, and fulfill my duties conscientiously, so help me God. And the oath of loyalty for soldiers and armed forces. I swear by God the sacred oath, I will render unconditional obedience to Adolf Hitler, the Führer of the German Reich and people, supreme commander of the armed forces, and will be ready as a brave soldier to risk my life at any time for this oath. Note that Hitler is not asking them to be loyal to their country, to Germany. He is asking them to follow him personally and swear allegiance and obedience to him. Here are photographs of Nazi soldiers taking their loyalty oaths to Hitler.